from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. To each according to his faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John we read, "Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God." It is a common experience, shared by most people, that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power, and the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil, that is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, "Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshipping with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me. Toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboreth right for the love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure." Thus through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. And now we would like to invite Dhyan to come up to speak to us. Dhyan is a minister from Ananda Village, and he's here with the team who will present the annual appeal after Sunday service today. And so we're very happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. I assume we keep the mask on.
You can or not, actually.
Is everyone okay?
You can,
Okay.
yeah, you can take it off. It's nice to see your face.
When I get the opportunity, I say yes. So, well, thank you, friends. It's great to be here. I'd like to begin today's service with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. Spiritualize our every thought, our thoughts and ambitions. O infinite alchemists, spiritualize our weaknesses into strength, in our wrong thoughts into right thoughts. Grow thou a flower of divine understanding with every seed of activity. With the magic wand of foresight given by thee, teach us to transmute the ugly imps of selfish ambition into fairies of all-serving, noble aspirations. Train, Lord, each stallion of desire to become a champion racing for thine abode. Transform our base ignorance into the gold of wisdom. that it become a liquid stream of spiritual gold, rushing steadily to thy shore. I'd like to start with a story, a vision actually of Yoganandaji's when he was a young boy. And in this vision, he saw a dusty marketplace. And in this marketplace, being India, not only were there hordes of people, but there were cows and monkeys and probably honking horns. It was quite chaotic. And occasionally, as he was observing this scene, a person would stop and look at something behind Yogananda. And in their face was this glory, this aspiration filled their whole demeanor, and they gasped for air. Wow, it's so beautiful. And then they said, oh, but it's far too great of a journey. And then they turned around and returned back to the multitudes. And again, Yogananda would observe, and somebody would occasionally stop. And after this happened a few times, Yogananda grew a little curious. Well, what are they looking at? What is so beautiful? And he turned around and he saw this majestic mountaintop, far removed from the chaos of this world. And on top of the peak was this perennial garden, lush, filled with life, completely pure and beautiful. And he yearned to experience that uplifted state of consciousness. His aspiration was bursting through his heart. And then the doubt assailed him as well. But it's far too great of a journey. And he felt that his energy began to drop, but he caught it. And he said, yes, it's too great of a journey to accomplish in a single step, but I'd rather die trying than return back to this marketplace of emptiness. And so it is for all of us, friends, that we have within us this soul call, this aspiration to live life on the heights. And it's a universal call that each soul must work with in their own unique way. But the end goal is the same. It's the realization of Satchitananda, that we are pure expressions of ever-conscious, ever-existing, ever-new bliss. But it's amazing that even though the goal is the same, the journey in which we're on is uniquely our own. That we have to learn our unique set of lessons. We need to live this life as best as we can, as far as we can understand, so that we can grow and expand our connection with Spirit. And it's quite fascinating, especially when we may follow the same teachings, we may practice the same techniques, we may even have the same guru. And yet how we relate to the path and how we connect with that indwelling Spirit is uniquely your own. And so all spiritual teachings sort of encourage us to embrace that path which is our own and to live that life which is going to lead us to greatest expansion. And so in today's sharing, I would like to explore some thoughts that I have found personally to be helpful in reminding me of the very personal nature of self-realization. And the first thought is to accept all that comes as coming from God. You know, whenever we work with spiritual attitudes, we're not creating something from nothing. We're simply harmonizing ourselves with the reality that already is. You know, when we were chanting Om, or when Om was playing, when we were meditating, it reminded me of this, that we chant Om not to create Om, we chant Om to harmonize with Om. And in that harmony, we find its eternal reality within us. And the same goes for the attitudes of accepting life as coming from God, because in very real sense, God is everywhere. God is in everything. You know, Yoganandaji said that, or the scriptures say, that God didn't create manifestation, he became it. That every aspect of creation is a manifestation of divine consciousness. And so this consciousness has two elements that I would like to explore. There's the element or the force that pulls our attention outside of ourselves, continue our involvement with delusion, with creation, with the senses, with the ego. And then there's that force that draws us closer to God, that withdraws our energy by the power of divine love. And no matter what experience we have in life, a decision is thrust upon us. Are we going to reject God's love? Or are we going to accept God's love? Interestingly enough, Yogananda said that that's essentially the extent of our free will. Isn't that fun? We think that we have all these decisions to make in life, and life can be endlessly complex. But in reality, there's only a twofold decision to make: to accept or reject. And so when we accept everything as coming from God, we open to that flow of divine love. We open ourselves to experience life on its highest, that we develop that intuitive perception, that divine vision, that God is the nearest of the near, dearest of the dear. I had an interesting experience in this regard when I first moved to Ananda Village some years ago. And I landed a job that was quite difficult for me to sort of face every day. In my inexperience, I figured, well, this isn't spiritual work. This doesn't look like what the devotee should be doing. And for many years, I rejected what God was giving me, and I closed my heart, and I assumed that things should be different than they are. Anybody been there before? I mean, how many times? And what trouble does it bring? And so for many years, I was working on this, trying to refine that attitude, try to find inspiration within and not in the circumstances themselves. And it kind of came to a head one day when I was mowing. And if anybody has been to Ananda Village, I assume many have, there's a lot of grass to mow. And we mow on a tractor. And so you have this big blade behind you. It's chaotic, it's noisy, it's dusty. You can't really tell what's going on until something's happened. And something did indeed happen. And all of a sudden I felt that it was raining. But it wasn't raining. It was the middle of July. And I looked and I yanked a hose. It got caught in the blade. And it yanked it out of the standpipe, which broke the water main. And thankfully, I had some experience working with Ramu, who handles the water department up there. So I quickly assessed the situation. I was a little overwhelmed. I turned the water off. I unearthed the pipe, and I was ready to get down to business. Well, as like most things in this world, it's more complicated than we think. And there was all these pipes coming into this one intersection. I'm just like, my God, what am I going to do with this? And I tried every which way to fix it, and I couldn't fix it. Then I remembered, God is nearest of the near, dearest of the dear. Call on Babaji. He's the master plumber. He can help you. He can come through, right? So I sat there, muddy, knees high in mud, drenching wet, and I called on the Babaji. What is the solution here? And I meditated a little bit. And believe me, I'm still astounded at what happened. With my eyes closed in this blistering heat, an image flashed in my mind. And it was the blueprint of the fix. It was the pipe that I needed to create. And I did, and it fit perfectly. And it was like, wow. There's no experience in this world that's void of divine inspiration if we but open ourselves to that inspiration. And so accepting life as coming from God, it's really seeing life in its most benevolent sense, because God has everything but our love. And Yogananda said that he regrets he regrets creating us in this world of delusion because we've gotten so enmeshed in this delusion. We've forgotten the source of our true nature as expressions of divine love. And so everything in life is an expression of God's wish to liberate us, to awaken us, to draw us back to that infinite presence of love within. I want to end this particular point with a beautiful story that maybe we all have heard of a once thriving monastery. And this monastery now only had 4 remaining members. And these elderly monks were doing their best to keep the energy going, but it was clear that their vocation was dissipating. And the head monk sought the advice of a wise person in town to get some advice of what they could do. And he visited this wise person, and like the movies depict, the wise person was a little crazy-looking, matted hair. He wouldn't respond directly to questions. It was a little chaotic, and the head monk was like, well, this was a wasted trip. And as he was taking his leave, the wise person said, oh, by the way, one of you is the Messiah. And the head monk was taken by that. It's like, the Messiah? Well, I know I'm not the Messiah. I mean, maybe Brother Matthew is the Messiah. So he walked back and he shared this with the other 3 monks, and they were also quite surprised. But what this did was that it changed the way they approached one another. That no longer was it just Brother Matthew interacting with Brother Job, ego to ego. They were open to the possibility that behind those eyes, behind that day-to-day interaction, there's the Messiah peering through, the Messiah here to awaken. And I would like to extend this to the circumstances of our life, to the people in our lives, the hardships we face, that everything is Christ consciousness coming to us to awaken us, that nothing is outside that consciousness, and we only have one choice to make. Do we accept it or do we reject it? So the second point I would like to explore is karma as returning energy. You know, Swami Kriyananda was once asked, is it difficult to find God? And he responded with great vigor, no, it's not difficult. All you need to do is focus your attention here, all your energy at this point, and then you'll be in God. Well, needless to say, that's easier said than done. But thankfully, we've been given the teachings and techniques to help regather our energy, to reclaim the energy that has been dissipated out in all our whims and fancies, and reclaim that and refocus that upward. And though the practice of the techniques is important, I think much more importantly, as Swamiji said, is the attitude in which we practice, the attitude in which we approach life. And to see karma as neither good nor bad, but simply look at our karma as returning energy, as God's help in bringing the energy back so that we can reinvest it. You know, when COVID first happened, there was a lot of different streams we could tune into. Isn't that true? We can tune into the fearful stream. We can tune into the conspiracy theme. There were a lot of things happening. And for devotees seeking God, I imagine that most of us felt inwardly determined to stay strong in our sadhana, to stay strong in our spiritual study, to make that a stronger foundation. And so our actions are simply an investment of energy. And the karma is the return of that energy coming back to us. And in many ways, it's a tremendous gift. Because if all we need to do is regather our energy and lift it to this point, what a gift to receive an experience that may at first seem like a trigger point. But in reality, what it is a stirring of energy on a certain level that we have the techniques and the teachings to help lift that energy to a higher octave. Karma is here as the great teacher. And interesting story. I was thinking, because this story refers to a disciple, and I was thinking, well, maybe this disciple lives here. I don't know. But it's an interesting story of somebody who was a longtime Kriya Bond disciple who went to a bank one day. And lo and behold, this bank was robbed. And everyone was forced face down on the ground as the robber came and went. And this disciple, who had spent many years trying to calm the reactive process, completely lost it. And she was very upset and fearful and agitated and very, turbulent. And after the robbery came and went, she was a little bit dissatisfied with her reaction. She's like, well, what happened there? After all those years of spiritual practice, where was I when in the time of need? And so she really took that in meditation. She didn't just disregard it and said, oh, okay, Om Guru, that's what it is. But she really took that opportunity to look at that reaction, to look at the root cause of that reaction, and to bring that energy into her meditation. And so she practiced, she prayed, she did her Kriya, and she felt like she got to a really nice place. And some time later on, can you believe it? She went to a bank and it got robbed again. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a divine Leela to me. I mean, that's amazing. And she was able to keep her composure. She was face down on the ground, gun waving in the air. And from her deliberate, conscious effort, she was able to stay calm and be a source of calmness for all. Now that's how we face our karma. It's not about, Yogananda said that circumstances are neutral. But what makes karma sticky? It's that we identify with the circumstances as being personally relevant. If something happens to us and we react to it favorably, then we think it's good karma. This is great. This is happening. But when we react negatively, it's easy to say, oh, this is bad karma. Why me? And how often do we miss the opportunities in our life because we somehow think it's not spiritual enough? We somehow think that if I only could have this way, or if I can only be this kind of person, if I can only fill in the blank. But if we can embrace everything that comes to us as simply energy or fuel for ever-deepening devotion, ever-deepening prayer, ever-deepening inner communion. And I invite you, next time you find yourself reacting or being attracted by something, observe that energy that's been awakened. There's a great deal of power in that energy. And if we develop that calmness to observe that awakened energy and step back a bit like we do in Hong Sa, step back and observe, then we can do something about it. We can reinvest it. And so we're all investors in the banking world of self-realization. And may the fruits of our investment bring us ever closer to that bliss within. And I just want to close because it all sounds far easier than it truly is. But Yogananda tells us that God will never give up on us as long as we don't give up on ourselves first. If we continue to put out the effort and try our best, that best effort will magnetically draw God's grace to help us. Never delude yourself into thinking that we're going to find God by our effort alone. But it's God's grace that's going to lift us up. And so in everything you do, try to be open to that presence of stillness. Try to be open to that grace. Call on Master, call on Divine Mother to be with you in every step of the way. And practice when it's easy. Lahiri Mahasaya said, if you invite God into your home to be a summer guest, He will also be there in the winter. It's very easy to forget God when things are going well. But as they say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. So practice when it's easy. Find little ways when you're making your breakfast after meditation, when you're interacting with your friends, when you're coming to service, when you find yourself in an uplifted state, offer your joy to God. And you'll find that it doesn't diminish, it only expands. And as we do this, little by little, we develop that kind of momentum that will lift the jet of our lives off the tarmac, and we'll be soaring in skies of inner freedom. Many blessings.
A few thoughts, and thank you for the priceless image of Babaji as the divine plumber. I just love that. It sort of compels me to share a story of my own plumbing at Ananda Village. I didn't actually break the line, but I was responsible for dealing with it. There is a 6-inch plumbing pipe, so visualize a pipe this big around that supplies the water to expanding light. Comes all the way down the hill from these enormous tanks up on the hill, which are not hooked to it directly. They're for fire use only. But nevertheless, this pipe comes down, 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 down. And there was, maybe there still is, a red fire hydrant sort of pipe that stands about yay high in the air down in the meadow adjacent to expanding light, kind of between the expanding light main facility and the new temple. And that juncture had this 4-foot piece of pipe and a big T in the ground, and then it changed to a 4-inch pipe that led to expanding light. Well, it broke right at the T, and the T broke in the ground about 3 feet down. And, and it was winter. It was like the 21st of December. So we had the all-day meditation coming on the 23rd, and there was no water to expanding light. And there was no new temple. I mean, the expanding light was the temple. And I was the maintenance person. And Vidura, who was in charge of the Expanding Light in those days, got on a plane the same night to fly to the East Coast to be with his family. And it was like, Vidura, what are you doing? I need help. So I went to Jaya and, asked his advice, what to get. And I remember driving, and so the all-day meditation went by. We had no water, was not a great situation there. And on the 24th of December, I thought, I don't know if these places are going to be open, but I drove all the way down here to Sacramento from Ananda Village to shop for 6-inch plumbing parts, and adapters and whatnot. And I put this thing together. I drove all the way down, drove all the way back, got in the hole, and put this whole thing back together, glued it all up, and prayed and prayed and prayed. I dragged a DeLonghi heater out there on a couple of 100 feet of cord, bailed it all out. So, stuck the heater down in the hole to dry this because it was freezing cold in December. And on Christmas Day, we finally cranked the water on and it held. And it was just, and then we, of course, filled it all back in. But I remember coming back into the Expanding Light dining room just toward the end of the meal. And somebody had saved food for me, and everyone was singing, and it was like, just God's grace. God's grace even works with plumbing. It's one of those, having worked in the construction trades, I will also echo what Dhyan was saying, that it's very easy at times to think, well, I don't know how God could be present in this particular, your tool just broke, or you just spent the entire day building something that now you get to have the privilege tomorrow of tearing back down, spend half the day going backwards just to get to where you were at the beginning of the previous day. There are times of deep frustration in the physical plane, but I'll also just quote something Dhyan said. There is great power in that karma, in that energy coming back. And if we use it willingly, that is the key. I love the Bhagavad Gita reading today. Starts with, complete offering, complete self-absorption in God. And well, if you can't do that, then do this. And yeah, if you can't do that, then do this. Serve me. If you can't do that, then do good things. If you can't even do that, then bring me your failure. Now, it sounds like we get away scot-free. We don't entirely get away scot-free because we have to bring the failure. We have to willingly offer the failure. We still have to be willing. But how many people are willing to offer failure? It's so easy to just look away from, no, that didn't happen. We're not going to look at that. There's an elephant in the room, but we're not going to look at that. And if we offer it, in a different passage of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, even a leaf I will accept if offered with devotion. And what better leaf can we offer to God than the failure that just happened, or whatever it may be, whatever in our life, or even the great success. I love that Swamiji said, we have to rise above our successes as well. Otherwise, we get hypnotized into thinking, oh, well, that's who I am. That's the sum, that's the best I can do. No. Offer that also, because then God will challenge us to do something better still. Or more in tune still, deeper still. That potential never ceases. And whether we feel like we live in that marketplace and are sort of have a life sentence in the marketplace, the dusty marketplace Dhyan was describing in Master's vision, or whether we feel like we're headed towards that high peak, or wherever we are along that journey, all we have to do is turn with joy towards the light and say, Divine Mother, I'm yours. naughty or good, whatever it may be, whatever disaster may still be coming towards me, I accept all with your love and devotion because I'm your own. I am your own. And this is in several times in Swamiji's music. He says literally those words, I'm your own. And we just have to remember that. We belong to God. We are made out of that Christ consciousness, as Dhyan was saying. It's part and parcel of our own being. We can never escape. We can never run away from it. We just need to embrace it. Namaste.